In order to explain the origins of house music, disco is essential, for it was from the ashes of disco that house was born. In 1974, this man, David Mancuso, moved his already infamous love parties to 99 Prince Street in Manhattan, New York. An invite-only party which did not sell alcohol, prided itself on bringing together mixed races with gay and straight revelers dancing under the same roof. David Mancuso and fellow loft DJ Steve DeQuisto were responsible for the very first record pool, which would lobby to the record labels in order to distribute evenly records to the city's DJs that were a member of the pool. This was to fight against the discrimination of a high-end record distribution, where only certain DJs would be playing the hottest tracks in the city. In essence, their work was to ensure that all the city's DJs got a fair supply of the latest tracks and allowed them to freely play to the crowds who were rushing to clubs to hear the disco-infused sound from which house music would later be derived from. DJs such as Tony Humphries, Francois K, Frankie Knuckles, Danny Krivitz, Nicky Ciano and Larry Levan all were regulars of the loft parties.
I'm surprised to see your suitcase at the door. Remember the good times, don't you want some more? It's not a perfect love, but I'll defend it, 'cause I believe it's what God intended. We got love, good way. It's not over between you and me. It's not over, don't want to be free. What has been joined by
In 1976, West End Records was founded by Mel Sharon and Ed Cushions, who were colleagues at Scepter Records. Scepter Records was closed in 1975 and West End was born. The name came from the location of their office, which was located in Manhattan's Broadway district, the West End. The address was 254 West 54th Street, ironically later to also be home to the infamous Studio 54. Later they moved the company to another West End address at 250 West 57th Street, where they released budding artist Karen Young and her acclaimed disco hit Hot Shot. Also on West End Records was a young artist named Jackie, whose hit You're a Star was remixed by Tom Milton, who later would be part of the place that really would put West End Records and Mel Sharon on the map, the Paradise Garage.
You
trying to spread the love and the knowledge of the garage because it was very important to a lot of people. A lot of people had stress, a lot of people had problems, had nowhere to go, and you would go to the garage, release so much energy. When you left that club, you was in paradise.
Have that great feeling of having been released.
The Garage, owned by Michael Brody, partner of West End Records, Mel Sharon, was the next step in making house music the force it is today. Although at the time, DJs like Larry Levan and a certain unknown Frankie Knuckles were still playing disco, but with re-edits from reel-to-reel tape machines. But all was not well within the disco days, with many slating the music and clientele that went to such places as the Loft, the Sanctuary and the Paradise Garage. The growing belief that disco was ruthless, inauthentic, decadent, and a betrayal of the true American folk music, rock and roll. Hence organisations such as Dread, which stood for Detroit Rockers, engaged in the abolition of disco, and the man that single-handedly brought disco to its knees in 1979. Detroit rock DJ Steve Dahl organised a Disco Sucks rally at half-time in Chicago's Comiskey Park baseball stadium, in which over 100,000 plus records were dynamited as disco-phobic mobs rampaged onto the field.
Steve Dahl was blowing up disco records out of Comiskey Park and, getting all these rock and roll heads to join in. And, there was a huge backlash on disco music.
This is now officially the world's largest anti-disco rally.
One of Chicago house pioneers, Vince Lawrence, explains his feelings on the day.
It was more about blowing up all this nigger music than, destroying disco. What I noticed at the gates were people were bringing records, and some of the records were disco records, and I thought those records were kind of good. And some of those records were just black records. They weren't disco. They were just black R&B records. And I should have taken that as a tone for what the attitude of these people were.
With disco in decline in New York, club promoter Robert Williams opened a new venue in Chicago, The Warehouse, with Larry Levan originally being asked to move to Chicago and be resident DJ, but decided to stay in New York. It left Frankie Knuckles to become Chicago's very own ambassador for what was to be known as house music.
I'd already been playing in New York for 5 years. And when the club closed, it was kind of depressing to me because it was one place it's the only place I had ever really played and I had only really known. And so when I got the Warehouse, it was an opportunity for me to build something from the ground up on my own. And more than anything, I wanted to make it a world inside of itself, and I wanted to make it the kind of place where people would come there and really rejoice and be happy about who they are. What I did was create kind of a poor man's paradise on a dance floor. It gives them an opportunity to completely escape the rigors of reality and just be one with themselves and hundreds of other people at the same time that could be total strangers.
Chicago house pioneer Chip E tells us the origination of the name house music.
If you were a DJ in Chicago, if you wanted to have the records, there was only one place to go, and that was Imports. This is where Imports was. People would come in and looking for warehouse music, and we would put, as heard at the Warehouse or as played at the Warehouse. And then eventually we just shortened that down to, because people also just in the vernacular, they started saying, yeah, what's up with that house music? Now at this time they were talking about the old classics, the South Soul, the Philly classics and such. So we put on the labels for the events, we'd say house music.
When your body's next to me, I begin to
Jesse Saunders and Vince Lawrence talk about the very first house track to be pressed to vinyl. Also, the arrangement and content of the track itself.
Jesse Saunders, on and on. The very first house record. To this day, I've had people offer me $1,000 for this, if not more. I recorded like the drums here and the bass and put like overdubs of the keys, all kinds of effecty synth stuff on there. And then Vince and I, did like this corny little rap.
And Jesse liked this line from White Horse where it said, "Bitch, wanna be rich, got to be a bitch." So it goes on and on. Then Jesse says, "Bitch."
It's the simple drum track and claps that make this early production such a great timepiece that allows us to see just how primitive the house scene actually was at this stage.
Things inside my soul,
They make me lose control. Goes on and on.
just clapping to the beat.
Cause Jesse thinks it's neat. Goes on and on.
Bitch. Just say that it's the crew.
Just say he makes you move. Goes on and on.
Marshall Jefferson and Chip E explained their feelings about this 1984 production On, and also how the new breed of producers would, from here on, start to bring house to the next level.
That was the single most important record to me of the 20th century because it let the non-musician know that he could make music.
Everybody thought when they first heard the record was, gee, I can do better than that, and why don't I give it a shot? The first thing you have to do is you have to start off with a strong kick drum. And then you have to have a bass line. And from there, you build on it. You build on it with snare drums. You build on it with the hi-hat. You build on it with the rim shot, with the claps.
DJs Earl Spanky Smith and DJ Pierre talk us through what was to be known as acid house, and how just by experimenting with an old karaoke machine, a Roland TB 303, they founded this new sound.
Well, basically, we started using the 303 just to try to make bass lines, because when we first started making music, it sucked. So I made this rhythm, what you hear playing right now.
And it's just playing straight. He said, but I can't figure out how to work this thing. It's still doing this weird, like, sound, you know. It's like, I don't know how to program it. So he's like, maybe you can figure out how to program it, because it didn't come with a book. And so I was like, instead of trying to program it, I just started turning knobs. And he's like, well, what you doing? I was like, I'm turning these knobs. He said, keep doing that. I'm like, I'm turning the knobs. And we just sitting there for like 30, 40 minutes. I'm just turning knobs. And like, yeah, I like that. I like that.
That was the birth of acid right there.
Although this new sound had been born, it was widely unknown and still needed a platform to be played to the masses. It was not until a tape of the track was handed to DJ Ron Hardy in the Chicago club The Music Box that this brand new sound was adopted into the hearts of clubbers and dance floors across Chicago. What was unknown to the house music pioneers at the time was that they were no longer just playing their music to a local crowd. The house sound and acid sound had travelled across the Atlantic and further afield, and was attracting clubbers from the UK, some of which had influences and a way and a means to showcase house and acid back home in the UK, especially Northern England, most notably Manchester and Nottingham. When a young Mancunian, Mike Pickering, played a gig in the Paradise Garage years previous with his then group Quango Quango, he devoted his time into bringing house music to the UK and its acid sound. In 1987 he formed T-Koi with Simon Topping from A Certain Ratio and Richie Close, and set up Deconstruction Records also. T-Koi were responsible for bringing the acid sound to England with their very first and Latin-inspired hit, Carino. But just like the Chicago pioneers, Mike Pickering also needed a stage from where to apply his trade. And in Manchester, that stage was the Hacienda.
Questions have been made about this new dance craze called acid. What people really want to know is how the story all goes about acid. This is acid. I'm gonna give you acid. This is acid. I'm giving you acid.
Opened in 1982 and owned by Tony Wilson and Peter Hook of Joy Division and New Order fame, the Hacienda had for the previous 5 years being a club that could only attract a limited crowd until the introduction of Acid House in 1987, with residents Mike Pickering and Graham Park taking centre stage, playing Chicago House, Soul and of course Acid House. The promotion started with a night called Narrated, and it was here that the Rave generation had come to start their revolution of dance music in the UK.
I know it's been said before, but the Hacienda was a blueprint for a lot of super clubs that followed. It was the first super club, but I think the people who behind Cream, Ministry of Sound, Gatecrasher, Renaissance will all admit that their ideas for their clubs were based on the Hacienda.
Acid House spread like wildfire. Shium had been opened by Danny and Jenny Rampling and was followed by Paul Oakenfold's Future, held at Heaven on Caring Cross Road. In January 1988, Shium adopted the smiley face logo for its flyers, and from there the symbol became the mascot of house music. As acid and the house scene progressed through the UK, it snowballed into a movement of young clubbers who previously had felt detached from society due to unemployment and a lack of places to go to socialise and hear their favourite music. With this huge influx of partygoers came the drug ecstasy, which seemed to fuel what was already a hedonistic atmosphere in the clubs. The national press initial coverage of the acid house scene was a positive one, with the Sun newspaper promoting famous craze of acid smiley face t-shirts, accredited with the 1988-1989 E-Culture as the latest fashion. They described acid house itself as cool and groovy, but this would soon change. Increased pressure from the subcultural press about the drug-crazed world of acid house and the dance scene's desire for a moral panic soon meant that acid house hit the headlines in the biggest possible way. Indeed, what followed may have been the single biggest contributing element in acid's explosion as young people's most popular form of entertainment at the turn of the decade. Maggie Thatcher's Tory government was beginning to struggle, and as Mo Bean suggested in her research, they targeted acid house and the ravers as a social scapegoat, and in high-profile battle they could win. The Sun was, until recent years, a self-admitted Tory newspaper, and was indeed one of the greatest attackers of acid house from 88 to 89. The Sun's treatment of acid may have come down to selling as many copies as possible, one of the main theories behind moral panics. It also suggests that the Sun's coverage of rave culture may have had some political agenda behind it also.
Radio and BBC banned it, and they said, you know, due to its lyrical content, and they said it was inciting the youth of today to consume drugs.
A handful of clubs added to another handful of headlines in the Sun equals pandemonium. You couldn't control it. Once it was out of the bag, it was out of the bag. So all of a sudden, everybody in the country wanted to get onto the kind of acid bandwagon.
In the UK, the scene had become more associated with drugs and criminals in the clubs. Over the next few years, and it had inevitably attracted the police and the attention of Parliament, who in 1994 introduced the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act, where a rave, which was defined as a gathering of 100 plus people at which amplified music, wholly or predominantly characterised by the emission of a succession of repetitive beats, is played, which is likely to cause serious distress to the local community in the open air and at night. These sections gave the police the power to order people to leave the land, and if they believed preparing to hold a rave, which classed as 2 or more people, waiting for a rave to start, 10 plus people, actually attending a rave, 10 or plus people, and ignoring this direction or returning to the land within the next week, are both offences liable to 3 months imprisonment and or a £2,500 fine.
This is a beautiful day. It is a new day. We are together. We are unified and on one accord. Because together we got power. Apart we got power.
Although the laws today do not favour dance music, house has continued to evolve into many subgenres and is still a global favourite today. In 2010, those who look back at the early days of house feel nostalgic, not just because of the music, but because of the time that it was. But with that nostalgia comes a reality that house was a feeling and a movement that cannot be repeated for future generations to come. Just like the Beatles or the Sex Pistols, house was the voice and the music of a place and time, and the voice of a generation of disgruntled youth that felt detached from the status quo of their time.